23 years. We talked earlier a little bit about some of the highlights of those 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back and revisit that. As you think about what, not only what you've accomplished and what the checkoff has accomplished, but what you see as being really standing out in those 23 years.
Well, that's a really interesting question. The trans fat issue was interesting, and I look at the opportunities that created, and so people kind of chuckle when I say when they say, well, what are the challenges? And I look at them and say, no, what you're really saying is, what are the opportunities?
Yes.
And so when we got the results of that study, to me it was about the opportunities, and we went right to ARS and talked to them about where we were going and what kind of research made sense to improve the bean. And then we reached out to industry to get industry involved, and Pioneer and Monsanto were two organizations that picked this up, and we made sure that we were collaborating with them as we went through this. So that was really huge, and that was the early years of the whole Better Bean initiative that led to the high, low Lin first, and then high Oleic that we have now. Carrying that thread through, we reached another pivotal point about in 2012, when the approval process for the high Oleic had really bogged down. And at this point we've had high Oleic soybeans in queue in Europe for 15 years.
Yes.
And it's really, it's if you think about the investment cost and what that means, it's really relatively shocking. So, but Pioneer and Monsanto both came to me and had separately and said, look, we need some help here doing this. You've done all this research and really help move this process along, but we're at a different level. We're at a commercialization level, and we need your help. And at that point, USB, we went back to the directors and we put together a program whereby we invested $60 million in high Oleic, $20 million with Monsanto and $20 million with Pioneer over a 5-year period. And we're approaching the end of that 5-year period. But what we did was we expanded the footprint for high Oleic very dramatically. Pioneer and Monsanto both had a target market approach. What they were doing was marketing these soybeans, and they would grow them in eastern Indiana, western Ohio. And we embarked with them on a research program that the $20 million to each of them was designed to expand that footprint and literally make soybeans that were high Oleic available to 80% of the growing area in the country. So that is just a huge opportunity. And now that we have approval in China for Monsanto's product, the Vista Gold, and all we're waiting for is the approval for Pioneer's Plenish in the EU for the stack trait, which will come probably October, November, December timeframe in that fourth quarter. Once we have that, I think we're really on a springboard forward with the product. So that's one thing that I think has been just really phenomenal. Another thing that happened early in my career at USB was that we really did a lot of work on things that made the industry better and more efficient. Marker-assisted breeding was one of the things that USB did, invested a lot of money in to ensure that would be available to industry, and what that's done is just sped up the breeding process dramatically. At the same time, we were approached by ARS, and they indicated to us that in the early 2000s that there were some opportunity with genomics, because genomics were the big thing at that time. And we took a look at what the art of the possible was, and USB invested $3 million over a 3-year period, which seemed like a lot of money at that time, and in genomics work. And we were told by ARS that if we had wanted to do that work 3 years earlier, it would have cost $30 million. And if we had wanted to do that work 6 years earlier from when we did it, it would have been impossible.
Wow.
So you think about the rate at which technology had progressed. And by doing that, we then were able to map the genome, and we did that again in conjunction with industry. So the benefit to soybean producers was that we now have a real understanding, a clear understanding of the soybean genome, and that kicked us off to the next level. I would say that as we move forward, the other thing that really stands out in my mind is the opportunities with biodiesel. When we lost probably 4 to 6 billion pounds of oil use in the U.S., the farmers had the foresight to invest in biodiesel, and biodiesel really took over a large portion of that oil that we lost. So biodiesel has been a really good thing for soybeans and soybean producers, and the soybean checkoff overall has been the major investor in those opportunities. I would say that the last thing and hopefully the most important thing is because of the future opportunities was the last strategic plan that we wrote. And I've been involved in, this is my fifth strategic plan at USB. And in doing so, we really significantly changed the vision, and that is basically saying that we're going to innovate beyond the bushel. We're going to continue to increase yield, but at the same time, we're going to look at the components of the soybean. We're going to move the industry to a value proposition and be able to ensure that soybean producers can compete with other producers around the world by enhancing the meal component of the soybean. As a result of that, we have invested in proof of concept research with Pioneer to increase the protein level in the upper Midwest, crude protein, by 1% to 1.5%. What that means is that the soybeans going out of the PNW would then be able to be high pro meal. And that's something they've not been able to do, and that would be a huge benefit to the industry. We're also looking at an enhanced nutritional energy meal that will convert some of the sugars that are non-soluble to soluble sugars, and that then will enhance the value of the soybean meal. Again, we're in a competition with canola meal, with DDGs, soybeans from other countries. We're in competition from synthetic amino acids. So there's a lot of competition out there, and we need to make the soybean better, whether it's the meal or the oil, and continue to move that process along. And I think the final opportunity in all this is to get to a constituent value proposition for soybean farmers. Because if farmers have the opportunity to look at their soybeans from the standpoint of the meal and oil and the protein levels that exist in their soybeans, they will realize more readily that at this point in time, the processors are telling them, bring us more bushels. Mm-hmm. But the processors know the protein and oil levels of those soybeans. The processors are really buying protein and oil. Mm-hmm. They tell the producer they're buying bushels, but they're buying protein and oil by the bushel. And then as it moves through the system, everybody looks at it more or less, and the end users are looking at it from the protein value and the oil value. So once we can get to a constituent value proposition, we then have an opportunity to really propel the improvements in the soybean forward.
John, I have known you for more years than I would like to count. Your level of excitement hasn't changed. you still have that that excitement and that love of what you're doing. Why now? Why leave now when there's so much that you're working on and obviously still left to do?
Well, that's a great question. So, I've reached an age where I think while my health is good, it's time to move on and do something else. I really looked at this from the standpoint of what's best for the organization, what's best for USB, and I kind of had a target date of leaving at the end of 2018. But as I do most things, I sat down and literally wrote out the pros and cons of leaving at the end of 18, at the end of 19, and at the end of 17. And on balance, as I looked at that and I went to my leadership and said, here's the analysis I've done, and I think it's best for the organization for me to go at the end of 17. And so that was the decision that I made. And at the same time, I've still got 5 months more to work. So if I don't have that passion and that intensity, the world is going to keep on moving, and I just need to keep on moving and doing the kind of things that I do. Besides that, it's the only way I know. So I intend to go on and do other things. Maybe not work the 3,000 hours a year that I work now, but do some other things for agriculture, and hopefully do some things for mankind, just being a good steward of the earth.
Wow, that's such a good place to end it. But let me think. What else do I want to ask you about? I didn't even look at my notes. I kind of glanced down at those. Gosh, long lens. How do you feel about the future, not only of soybean production in this country, but the future of agriculture in this country?
I think the future of agriculture is at the threshold of huge opportunities. And I mean, we talk about big data, and we really haven't figured out how we want to use that. We look at measuring technology for measuring almost anything, and the opportunities to produce a better crop more sustainably, more efficiently for the farmer, and at a less cost. I think there's just huge opportunities there. The CRISPR technology that we're seeing now, I think, is the first step in the next plateau for agriculture. I mean, if you really think about it and look at it, it wasn't long ago, and when I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, we still had workhorses. So it was not long ago that we moved from horses to tractors, believe it or not. It was in the history of the world and the history of agriculture, this is an extremely short time frame. But we went from that to the introduction of hybrid seeds, to manufactured fertilizer, to the whole crop protection era, and then into the biotech era. And I think that as you look at that, every step in that process that I've named has elevated agriculture dramatically. And I think that those step changes are small by comparison to what we can see for the future. And if you ask me what is that future, I honestly don't know, but I really want to be in some way part of that whole technology. And I think the good thing is, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, the good thing about this is that there's an opportunity to move beyond agriculture. And I think that these enabling technologies that are available or coming available have not been examined in a way that best benefits agriculture. And I think that the opportunities to bring those together with agriculture just is going to propel us to the future. So I'm really excited, and I think that the opportunity to feed 9 billion people is while to some people might be daunting, I think it's just a great opportunity that's going to propel us forward.
John, anything else that you would like to share or talk about?
You know, it's been great. It's been a great 23 years. The producers that I've met have been tremendous, and that I've had the opportunity to work with. The folks like you and the people in the media that we've been able to work with have been great. You know, the news media and agriculture is friendly, but you all ask the tough questions, as you should. And that's been really a great opportunity. Overall, as the industry people that I've worked with have been nothing short of phenomenal. And so, as a whole, I've enjoyed my career at USB tremendously. I hope that the next CEO that comes enjoys it as much as I have, and hopefully more.